What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm George.
I'm Stav.
So, as you guys know, we have mine and Stav's car in the shop for some work. But before we start digging into these cars, we wanted to take a minute and kind of go over these setups while they're actually in the car and kind of explain what we've done, the routes, some of the issues that we've seen, to give you guys a heads up for those of you guys that are doing Volkswagen VR6 swap. Now, I know a lot of you guys have seen our older videos and we said we're going to include links in the description. We've since removed a lot of those descriptions because those parts just simply aren't available anymore. So we wanted to do an update video. There's going to be a lot of custom parts that we're going to go over this, but there are going to be some factory style parts that you guys could use to swap and bolt these motors in, with some exceptions. So we wanted to make sure that we broke that down in a video for you guys. Again, for those looking to swap a Volkswagen VR6 motor into a B5 chassis or B6, B7, whichever chassis you choose, a lot of the parts are interchangeable. So we're gonna go over my car, we're gonna go over Stav's car, and hopefully explain some of these things in detail to help you guys out. Now, for those of you guys that may be out there doing these swaps as well, if you figured anything out, please tell us in the comments below, email us, let us know. We'll include that in future videos. Everyone's learning as they progress with these swaps. So if you got some cool part that works, some cool trick, let us know, we'll include it. Maybe that actually might help our builds and our cars. Anyway, guys, without further ado, here is the VR6 swap breakdown in a B5 chassis. All right, guys, so this is my 24 valve VR6 swap. I'm gonna go over the cooling. I used, this car originally came with an S4 twin turbo V6, which had a passenger side and driver side coolant hose, which was upper and lower, and I wanted to keep that kind of same rhythm going. So we ordered a triple pass from Van Buren Industries, which will include a link in the description. And then we have the upper and lower coolant pipes. And then what's really cool, if you guys see over here, this coolant pipe here, which bolts up like factory, it's because it is a factory part. This is a Cayenne slash Phaeton slash Touareg coolant pipe that came on the larger SUVs. And in the larger SUV and the Cayenne, the VR6 came longitudinally mounted. So there's a lot of parts that we can kind of borrow from them. In terms of cooling, we were able to kind of retrofit that pipe. And then I also have a 2.7T auxiliary water pump that we wired in. Well, I'm sorry, we did not wire this in. Turbo Joe wired this in, but we included it in the setup. So I have a switch. Whenever temperatures get too hot, I just flip it. It'll turn on the auxiliary water pump, which helps kind of coolant flow get through the motor. The VR6 motors are known for running really hot, and it's also wired to a fan. I have one large, what size was this stuff? 16?
16 inch.
16-inch small fan, and we also have another small 5-inch on the floor towards the bottom of the radiator, and we'll get into that a little bit later as we talk about fan cooling and so on and so forth. Oh, and then also instead of having my coolant res bottle here, which in the 2.7T will include a photo when the old motor was in, was here, now Turbo Joe was kind enough to make us this reservoir box, and that's a built-in pressure cap on there, and you can pick it up from any AutoZone or O'Reilly's or any race shop that normally has those. But again, standard radiator cap on our reservoir box there, and that's my coolant system. Tried to stay as true to whatever the setup was before. Again, and we'll go over why we had to switch it up as we talk about intake manifolds later on in this video.
All right, guys, so this is my radiator setup. This is a A4 style radiator setup, but it's a larger core. It's a 56 millimeter core. I have 3 pusher fans in front that are 7.5 inches wide across. And then I have 2 puller fans that are vertically over here mounted, and that's being controlled by the aftermarket wiring harness by this probe in the fan. So these 3 are controlled by the factory wiring, and these 2 are controlled by aftermarket. So when you shut the car off, it turns on at 180 degrees and shuts off at 150.
Where'd you get the electronic fan wiring kit?
Only the greatest place on earth, AutoZone.
That's right. So that's a factory, or that is an AutoZone electric fan kit that you can get, and it comes with a probe that is installed wherever you want on the radiator. So we ended up putting it here, and that trips off a couple of his fans.
And then we have the factory coolant bottle off like a Mark IV. In here, we obviously removed the factory A4 because of it hitting the intake manifold. So we mounted it here at the highest point, so we don't have any bleeding issues or overheating, bubbling issues.
And you don't have an external or a auxiliary water pump like I do.
No, I do not have that. I mean, we drove this car in high 90-degree temperatures and never overheating, so. Okay. It is an added feature that is nice, but we didn't add it to this car.
And what coolant do you actually run in the car?
G12.
G12, so factory Volkswagen / Audi coolant.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, and which is now G13, but G12 is the same thing. You guys can still pick that up.
Correct.
VR6 intake manifold. This is originally designed and made for a Mark IV Jetta or Golf that's transverse. So we had to tweak it to make it work in mine. We added a vacuum template. Local fab shop kind of welded this in for us, and then the 1.8T air intake temperature sensor, and then the map sensor on the bottom. Again, this was made for a car that was in the transverse. No one makes a longitudinally mounted intake manifold for the 2.8, unfortunately, so I had to roll with this, and so far this is done pretty well. And then for my throttle body setup, I have a 82 millimeter Porsche 996/997 drive-by-wire throttle body that we incorporated into it. And then, of course, that's wired into the standalone that we're using. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I do plan on having an intake manifold made. We ended up hitting Nubworks up, and we purchased this 24-valve flange for the head. So we're looking to have that made and then make a 1.8T style plenum made, so it's a little bit more cleaner and it comes across. It's a combination of two things. Does this intake manifold flow? Sure. Does it work so far? Sure. But it's a pain in the butt to get to that coupler in the back. It really does make a whole bunch of extra piping that has to go through the bottom. This would save us, if we went with a 1.8T style, which you'll see like a style like that on Stav's car, that will save me about a foot and a half in intercooler piping. So maybe drop down some pressure loss as well. But we'll see. And that is my 24-valve VR6 intake manifold.
I'll show you guys my intake manifold. This is the old 034 MotorSports intake manifold. Basically, the old system used to be used a Mark III intake runners with a custom plenum. It has just a universal fuel rail for the car. It runs the same way, which if you notice, you have to notch the hood to get the fuel rail to fit, because you see as it has touched a few times before the notching.
Yeah.
You have to use a 180 fitting straight back to my fuel regulator.
And then who fabricated? I mean, I know 034 carried this, but who made this intake manifold?
IROS Motorsports.
Hank used to make VR6 parts, V6 parts?
Yeah, he used to make fast cars. I mean, I don't know what happened these days.
All right, that's cool. And then what throttle body are you running on yours?
This is a OBD1 VR6 Passat throttle body.
Okay, and then I see you have your Vibrant Wiggins style clamp on there?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Going to a 3-inch pipe.
And then while we're at it too, what kind of throttle are you is that cable, drive-by cable?
Since this is a 98 pre-facelift, this is still a cable car, where your car is the new style throttle body.
Drive-by-wire.
Drive-by-wire, which not as fast, but this is the old style cable-driven car.
Nice. Air intercooler, I chose to go water to air, not to just complicate things. And again, I'm sorry for all the wires and hoses everywhere, but we had a water to air intercooler made by a shop in Vegas. Ended up having some issues with leaking, so we had to get it fixed locally. But that has two 10 AN lines of coolant or water, whichever you want to roll through it. And then the turbo basically compresses all the air here, forces it into the intercooler, water is rushing through, cooling down the fins, and we've seen some really, really super low intake temperatures. So that's been pretty cool. But the reason why I went with the water to air, number one, I didn't want to cut up the front bumper. It's a OEM RS4 front, and I didn't want to cut it up or damage it. And usually big front mount intercoolers require a lot of modifying on these bumpers, and these are rare. They don't make these anymore. On top of that, I really wanted a super cool charge, especially when we started hitting the half mile with this car, maybe even the quarter mile. And I know you guys, especially you seasoned guys out there, you guys might say, well, the water air adds a lot of weight. We're going to make up for it in other areas too, but it's a really efficient and it works really, really well. A lot of different companies, twin turbo Lambo guys use it. A lot of big time drag racers and half mile guys in various setups use it. So it's something that we wanted to incorporate into my build, and it's something that I wanted to do. So let me show you guys the reservoir that we put in the trunk. This is it was the 7 gallons that we went with. We bought it off of, I think Amazon Prime or eBay, the tank. And we're actually running G12 coolant in there. All right, and that's hooked up to a pumping system in the back. Let's see. But this is my water to air. Now, is this way too large, way too big for what we're gonna be doing? Possibly. I do like driving this car a lot, especially to work and traveling around the town. So having a large tank has a lot of fluid, especially with the hot ambient temperatures, it gets up to like 110, 115 here. So I like having a large reservoir there that keeps kind of the fluid clean. Now, I don't have a heat exchanger for the water to air. I think I may add that maybe in the lower trunk area. Maybe have to cut out one of the spots to get airflow, but we'll see. But that right there is my water to air intercooler system.
All right, so this is my 900 horsepower precision intercooler core. It is quite large. It's way different than George's water to air. This is what George was talking about when it comes to the larger core. We had to massage the bumper, cut big chunks of it. There is no actual support on the inside.
And mention it too, one of the reasons why we were able to trim this bumper is because it's a replica RS4 bumper, and it's something that Stav's going to be using for racing, so I didn't really mind trimming a lot of it for the piping.
Correct. We didn't want for the piping to fit the large core in, because usually there's a large support bar in here, which is why we had to go with a smaller fan setup and multiple smaller fans compared to George's one large fan. It's because of the size of the intercooler. It does take up about 50% of the front face of the radiator.
And again, you didn't have any overheating issues or anything like that, right?
Absolutely not. No, and we drive the cars in hot weather, and we're not very friendly to them.
Okay.
So yes, this does cut up a big section of the front bumper, but we didn't have to add the water tank like George's setup, which is a really nice setup for racing. We can add ice and everything, but we wanted to use two different setups here to utilize. I'm using air to air. George is using water to air. We'll do some testing and see which one actually works out best, because in California we have 105-degree weather in the summer, which with water to air, even with a great heat exchanger, will rise in temp. But for racing, throwing ice and everything in it, it would actually work pretty good.
We'll see. We'll take some logs of the air intake temperatures off of your standalone of mine this season, and then we'll see what it does.
Yeah.
And that there is Stav's intercooler setup on his 12 valve. So I want to talk about turbo manifold setups. As you guys know, in my older V1 in the narrow body, I had a collector that was made up to the factory manifolds, and I'll show you guys a picture of that now. Early 2016, end of 2015, I ended up picking up this tubular manifold that was used by a guy that did a VR6 swap in his S4 and made a crap ton of power. So his setup essentially is twin 38mm gates, just like my old setup, except now it's tubular manifold. The quality and the work on this is simply amazing. I haven't been doing a great job of kind of cleaning it. As you see some of the coolant spots. We've had some leaks and some issues over the last couple of years. So while it was running, there's some spot stuff on here, but it's twin gates, twin tile 38mm gates that dump down, doesn't recirculate back into the exhaust, sounds really monstrous and great. At first I thought maybe it'd be too loud having an open dump, but it makes it all the more worth it. It sounds amazing when the gates open up. And you also get some cool flames that shoot on the bottom of the car when you're doing your anti-lag, or you're doing a launch, or you're getting ready to kind of do a heavy run. And that's made it up to my 4502. Previously I was running a GTX 4294 dual ball bearing. Again we have a turbo blanket on here, which we're getting ready to remove since we're pulling the turbo setup. But this is my tubular exhaust manifold and / turbo setup going into a 4-inch downpipe going out to the rest of the car.
Alright guys, so this is my exhaust system here. I have a custom-made tubular manifold. It goes to a 45mm Turbo Smart wastegate with a straight dump going straight down to the ground, as you can see right there. It has a 66mm dual ball bearing turbo that has a 3-inch downpipe going out. This car with the 3-inch is extremely loud, actually way louder than George's car, and also faster, but that's another thing. This is a oil-cooled turbo. This, unlike George's, which has coolant lines run to it, this just has one oil line and one oil return, which is a 10 AN return line. It's a pretty simple setup. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so ignition setup in my 24 valve VR6. It's a little different than Stav's. Because of the way the 24 valve is set up, we have a clearance issue going to the hood. And we tried, I'm telling you, I went through maybe 16 different types, maybe 14, I think it was like 14 different types of coil packs. So we could find the right length and what clears the hood. So originally we tried to use the OEM VR6, which popped out an extra inch and would hit the hood and would have huge issues.
It would break the connector.
And it would break the connector. Now, we didn't have any ignition issues. The car ran fine. For a while, I had the old narrow body without the hood installed. So the car did just great, but I need to have the hood installed, especially here in California. So we ended up playing around a little bit more. We found that the Passat W8 coil packs are angled at this 90-degree, check this out. So it turns off to the right instead of going straight up, and it clears the hood perfectly. And a lot of people had said we weren't going to be able to make a lot of power with them, that they wouldn't handle the spark, but the last time I was at the dyno and we ran out of fuel, we made 754 wheel horsepower on this car with an OEM Volkswagen Passat W8 coil pack.
So they were right, because that's what my car makes it idle, but let's keep going.
But so the coil does really, really well. For those of you guys that are curious, it clears the hood and it offers a lot more spacing in between. And it was being able to be wired to the Haltech standalone. So for those of you guys that are running either OEM setups or ME7 stock ECU or standalone, you could use these coil packs and not have an issue. Now, I don't know if you can make more power with them. We're going to go back to the dyno in the next few weeks. Hopefully next month I could schedule some time with Turbo Joe, and we'll see if this can handle the spark for an 800 plus horsepower motor. But so far at 754, it hasn't skipped a beat and it's done really well. And I'm also running the same spark plug as Stav. Mine's going to be roughly around 22 thousandths for the gap.
So I wanted to show you guys my ignition system, because a lot of different people run factory coil packs, and like George's car is running. I'm running a waste spark system, which is a Bosch MotorSports coil pack, which we located here because there's the batteries in the trunk, and we're actually running 8mm wires to each spark plug. It's a really old style system, but it works really effectively. When we made the standalone, we had the option of putting like a factory coil pack in, and we could have done it, but we already had a system that worked, and it worked pretty well, so we just kept it that way.
And these are MSD style kind of setup?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, these are MSD spark plug wires, and it goes to spark plugs.
And what spark plugs? Oh, does it go to spark plugs?
Well, this is not a rotary, so it has a spark plug.
And what spark plug are you actually running on this car?
I'm running BKR7Es that are gapped to 24 thousandths.
Okay, cool.
That's really cool.
Over oil cooler setups. If you if you zoom in over here, I'll put a light. I don't know if it's super clear, but we have a Mocal sandwich plate going to our oil filter housing that's on the driver's side, which is also the engine bracket that we utilize, and I'll show you guys some pictures of that uninstalled, so you can kind of see what that's all about. And then two 10AN lines going around, and then on the outside here on the bottom is the oil cooler mounted behind the left-hand driver's side bumper.
So if this was a factory 2.7 car, your oil cooler is where the intercooler would have been.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The oil cooler, I mean, since basically the bumper was designed to have airflow thrown to that area, because the stock 2.7 twin turbo motor had intercoolers there, it kind of works out in our favor, because now air is jamming in there and then cooling down my oil cooler that's in there. And again, it's a factory, I had to say factory, it's a stock Mocal part that anyone could buy. I'm gonna see
it's a 10-row oil cooler.
Pretty much, yeah. And then you can also piece together your own oil cooler, your own sandwich plate, but we ended up going with the Mocal unit, and it bolted right up, and then I just had to make my own little lines over there and just kind of swedge them. And it works pretty well. On cold nights, oil temps, you'll just see them drop really drastically. And I know some of the guys out there might say, it's better to use thermostatic because you don't want the oil temps to drop that crazy. But with us, especially with the ambient temperatures being 110, 115, when we go out to Vegas, it's like 118 out there. We're going to take the car over there. We want any chance that we can get to cool down, whether it be fluids in the engine, oil, coolant, whatever the case may be. So we'll take any advantage that we can get. Looking for a real motor?
That's not funny. Anyway, hey guys, so I wanted to show you guys, I have the same sandwich plate on my motor. It goes right there, it goes to a 10-row oil cooler down here in the same spot that George's is. It's essentially a very similar setup. The car runs anywhere between 205 and 215 oil temps in the summer here, which is pretty on point, especially when we're beating on these cars as hard as we do. It's a very simple setup. It's fairly cheap. It's about $149 online. We bought it from Summit, I believe.
And you're running the RS4 replica bumper, which is also designed to have airflow through there, so it actually works really well.
It's completely unrestricted here. All the airflow goes to it, which helps. These motors are notorious for high oil temps, especially when you're, my turbo is only oil cooled. There's no cooling going through it, so temps spike even higher than normal. So that really does help regulate the system. So this is my 24 valve fueling setup, 1400cc injector as is. Billet 034 Motorsports rail with our 180 fittings on here to convert it for a longitudinal mounted engine. Going back to a Fuel Lab fuel pressure regulator, digitally monitored by Haltech. So you got our fuel pressure sensor there, and going back to the Continental flex fuel sensor back here, which kind of controls how the ECU reacts to different fuels and the octane ratings and ethanol content that's inside the fuel, which is kind of cool. Just like Stav's car, we ran brand new fueling lines all the way to the back of the car. 8 a.m. feed going all the way to right here to the beginning of the motor, and then a 6 a.m. return. I'm running a brushless in-tank pump. We made 754 wheel horsepower last time at the dyno with this car, but the pump is pretty much maxed out. Turbo Joe had to increase duty cycle on the injector. So 1400cc injectors at 98%, 97% to make 754 wheel, and the pump just couldn't provide any more pressure, even with us messing with base pressure too. So, but 754 horsepower, wheel horsepower is good, but we need more. So we ended up going with a Radium. This is a dual pump 485 Walbro surge tank, and this is going to solve a few different issues, one that I'm not even having yet. This is going to provide fueling support for enough power, more than enough power that I'll ever need, 1,000 plus, and then also this will provide racing competitive edge. So when I go drag racing, half mile racing, and I'm doing the launch, I won't have any siphoning or feeding issues inside the tank. I won't have to run 6 or 7 gallons or more inside the tank in order to have properly fed pumps. I can have almost no fuel inside the OEM pump and have plenty of fuel that's pressurized inside this church tank. Another reason why I'm doing this instead of running race fuel as opposed to E85, E85 is much cheaper than the C16 that's here locally. It's $9 to $10 a gallon for C16 versus $2 to $3 a gallon, and I can get it from the local pump for E85. Tuning benefits are, you guys can Google, you guys can check out some really cool YouTube videos. We'll try to include some that we follow on why 85 is widely used and why we prefer it, knock resistance, cooling effect. But on top of that, another reason why is it's just cost. It's a lot cheaper, especially a vehicle that I drive everywhere and I want to drive and go race. I don't have to have a C16 truck following behind me. Like if I'm racing only on C16, and that's going to be quite expensive driving the car every day. So E85 and as an ethanol content sensor, and I can switch back to 91 whenever I want to, and the ECU from Haltech automatically adjusts. And then also injector-wise, we upgraded. So I haven't installed these yet. The 24 valve VR6 doesn't have huge injectors. So the largest injector was, I don't know how many cc's?
1750.
17s. So we needed at least 2,000 cc's that I wanted to upgrade to. So the largest I was able to find was 2150s, which we converted with a lower adapter to fit our length for the large body. And we'll be installing these just as this car is getting ready to go back for tuning at Turbo Joe. Other than that, guys, that's my fueling. That's my fueling setup for the 24 valve VR6 setup.
So I want to show you guys my fueling system. I have a brushless pump in the tank, and I have the Aeromotive fuel pressure regulator and an ethanol, the standard GM Continental sensors for flex fuel. So my ECU is able to adapt to the different type of ethanol we have in the car.
And what's this right here?
This is the fuel pressure sensor we have that reaches to the ECU. So we know if I'm running at a pump, injector, the ECU can pick up.
And then with this fuel pressure regulator, you can still adjust it from the top manually just to do the base pressure, and then digitally kind of monitor it here.
Correct. Yeah, we can adjust it here, physically. Then over here we can monitor everything with the ECU. It really helps for the tuner to be able to lock everything down.
And then you have one brushless pump inside the tank.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, and that's Stav's fueling setup. And all, what's your lines that run up and down the car?
I have a Dash 8 feed line, which is right here, and then I have the Dash 6 as a return.
Nice. Okay, so here is a standard either RS4, B5, and there's other types of clusters. This is just an RS4 one that are used in the B5. And a lot of guys make plug-and-play harnesses to make these work with standalones or factory ECU setups to work with different engine swaps and stuff. So, you know, long story short, they're not always perfect. There's always Christmas lights, little things that don't work. Sometimes RPMs don't work in them, fueling gauges, all this stuff don't work. So I wanted something to work, and I had to go away from the OEM setup. So ended up going with the Haltech IQ3, and then we kind of developed our own cluster mount, which I'll show you guys a quick picture of in the video, but that bolts in and fits just like stock into the B5 in your A6, in your A4, S4, RS4. We're in the garage, but I'll do a quick startup real quick so you see how everything kind of lights up, but it's really cool having the digital feature inside the car. Let the pumps prime and then kick fuel. And then idle. And then I have different buttons that Turbo Joe kind of set up for, and again, sorry for the mess, but different buttons for dimming, and then how it's set up on the actual cluster, whether it be boost. I can set up different setups, RPM, fuel, all types of stuff, and it works really, really well. And that's just one setup. That's just the way mine is. Let's go over to Stavs and he'll show you what his dash looks like.
You guys saw George's setup. This is my setup in my car. This is a pre-facelift 98 B5 cluster. Everything works on my cluster. The only thing I do have is an airbag light, which I believe is because something's probably disconnected. Who knows? I'll show you guys a startup. So you guys are going to see my car. You hear the pumps prime. So you guys hear my car start up. The RPM gauge works. The temperature gauge works. The volt is reading 14 volts right there. Fuel pump is reading, it's showing that I'm low on coolant, so that goes to show, because it is true, we have the coolant line disconnected. And the temperature gauge for the coolant is working. Everything seems to be working on this dash. RPM, speed, even the whole little clock from 1998. So, you know, as you guys see, this is the two different setups. George has the digital cluster, I have the factory cluster, but both seem to be working pretty well.
All right, guys, that about wraps it up. Those are our VR6 swaps. You know, Stav went with them standalone. I went with Haltech. I used a 24-valve VR6. Stav ended up picking up a car with a 12-valve, and now he's enhancing it, and he's running with that setup. As you guys probably see with swaps like this, and I'm sure this transfers to other like makes and models too, you're going to have to figure things out as you go. There's not going to be a guidebook. There's going to be things that are different for you in your setup and what you want to do. You're going to have to work with it. A lot of our coolant lines, especially mine, I had to buy a whole bunch of universal hoses from AutoZone and Pep Boys and just kind of cut them up and make my own. So I don't really have anything that I could just buy off the shelf. A lot of the intercooler piping, turbo setups, all that stuff is special fab. So do yourself a favor. If there's anything that we've both learned is find the legit fabricator, number one. Number two, find the legit harness and tuner. Someone that can guide you and give you an idea what's to be expected. Do not deal with overseas and just long distance tuners. Deal with people that are local to you. And if you have to drive a few hours to take your car there, make the trip. It will save you a year's worth of headache and kind of suffering with dealing with a setup that doesn't work, or you can only have one guy tune it in the world and only he knows the setup. So, and that's one of the benefits too that I found going with standalone versus the stock ECU. Stock ECU, I was limited to one or two people. One of them was out of the country. That was a 10-hour time difference. I had to send logs back and forth. It almost took forever. And the local tuner didn't even want to touch it with the stock ECU. So having standalone, I can literally go to any shop I want that's legitimate, that has a dyno, that knows Japanese setups in terms of the JDM cars, that can know American Muscle because they run AM Infinity, Haltech, and a lot of these systems all kind of, you know, they're really familiar with tuning them, and they're a lot easier to do.
There's different ways to do it. This is just the way we did it. If you guys have any questions, or you know, the ways that you guys thought you could do it better, or ways that we could enhance what we have, please put it in the comments, because you know, this is obviously a growing process. You know, every time you see the car, it's going to be something different on it.
Like a 24-valve motor in here or what?
That'll never happen.
Again, we are less than, I think, 90 subscribers now to our 15,000 subscriber mark. So at 15,000, we are going to be giving away the 2 wash kits from Chemical Guys, like we did in the beginning of January for the New Year kickoff. So 80 away, and then we'll be choosing 2 subscribers at random out of our list of subscribers, and we'll be sending them. Shipping, of course, is on us, and so is the wash kit. So if you haven't already, hit that like, hit that subscribe, so this way you can enter into the giveaway. And I'm not really sure what we're going to be doing for the 20,000 subscriber giveaway. We did get one of these for Neverlift, where we won $500. Obviously, that's not a real check, but we're waiting for the real check to arrive. Once it does, that'll be $500 I think we're going to put towards the channel and towards a giveaway to you guys. So let us know in the comments below, what kind of giveaways do you realistically want to see?
I think at 20,000 we should give away your wide body.
Wow. Thanks guys for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video.
Talk to you guys later.